There are places where the trees stand too close together, where the ground sinks under silent footsteps, where no church bell has rung for centuries. In the heart of Poland, an entire village vanished without battle, without fire, without record. The forest closed in, and never let go. In the mid-1600s, deep within the woodlands of southern Poland, a small agricultural village stood at the edge of an expanding forest. The region was marked by shifting borders, war, and disease. Yet this settlement did not disappear from invasion or plague alone. Over time, the forest advanced. Houses emptied. Paths dissolved. And the village name slowly faded from memory. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in the 1600s was vast and complex. It stretched across forests, rivers, and trade routes. Southern Poland contained dense woodland that had never been fully cleared. Villages were often carved from forest by hand. Trees were cut. Roots were burned. Soil was turned with simple iron tools. The village at the center of this story was small. Fewer than 100 residents. Wooden cottages built from pine and oak. Thatched roofs. A modest church of timber. A dirt road connecting it to a nearby market town several miles away. The settlement relied on rye, barley, and livestock. Winters were long. Summers were brief but fertile. The forest always stood near the edge of the fields. It was not merely background. It was a presence. Wolves were common. Wild boar damaged crops. Timber merchants occasionally passed through. The villagers understood the forest as both resource and threat. In the 1640s and 1650s, the region suffered instability. Armies crossed Poland during conflicts that weakened the Commonwealth. Some nearby settlements were burned. Others were abandoned temporarily. But this particular village survived the direct violence. It was not strategically important. It had no fortress, no road of military value. What it did have was isolation. Trade routes shifted slightly after the wars. A larger road was established farther east. Merchants stopped passing near the settlement. Taxes remained. Labor demands continued. Fewer goods came in. More young men left in search of work in growing towns. Climate also played a role. The 17th century fell within the period known as the Little Ice Age. Winters became harsher. Harvests grew less predictable. Crop failures occurred more often. The soil, already thin from years of cultivation, weakened. Each season required more labor for smaller returns. Families began to relocate gradually. First one household, then another. Some moved to fortified towns. Others joined relatives elsewhere. Houses were left standing. Fields were not replanted. Fences collapsed. When farmland is not maintained, the forest advances quickly. Saplings rise in a single season. Roots break apart abandoned foundations. Paths disappear under moss. By the late 1600s, only a few elderly residents remained. The church door no longer opened weekly. Smoke rose from fewer chimneys each winter. The village had not been destroyed. It had thinned. And the forest waited patiently at its edge. As the decades passed, nature did not retreat. It expanded. Without constant clearing, shrubs and young birch trees overtook the abandoned fields. The soil, once plowed into neat lines, became uneven. Rainwater collected in shallow depressions. Marshy ground formed where crops once grew. Travelers from neighboring settlements still knew of the village. Some passed through occasionally. They described leaning cottages, doors hanging open, roofs beginning to sag. A few attempts were made to resettle the land. A landowner reportedly offered incentives for new families to farm there. Timber was plentiful. The soil, though weakened, was still usable with effort. But the location had gained a reputation. It was remote. It felt exposed to wilderness. Wolves roamed closer each year. Superstition began to replace memory. Stories circulated about strange sounds in the forest. About lights seen between trees at dusk. About graves untended and sinking into earth. No written records confirm these tales. But oral traditions in nearby villages spoke of a place taken back by trees. Meanwhile, economic centers shifted further west and north. Market towns expanded. Roads improved elsewhere. The abandoned settlement lay increasingly outside practical routes. By the early 1700s, it appeared on fewer maps. Cartographers sometimes marked it faintly. Some editions omitted it entirely. The church records ceased. Tax documents stopped listing households. Nature accelerated its quiet reclamation. Roof beams collapsed under snow. Walls rotted. Insects consumed wood. Vines wrapped around doorframes. The forest canopy thickened overhead. Less sunlight reached the ground. Underbrush spread across what had once been the main street. The well filled with debris. Within 2 generations, the physical layout became difficult to trace. Hunters occasionally found fragments. A carved beam. A rusted hinge. A section of stone foundation beneath roots. But there were no standing walls left to define a village. Only irregular mounds in the earth. The silence deepened. No battle marked its end. No epidemic buried it at once. No official decree erased it. Instead, absence accumulated. Human footsteps grew rare. Then they stopped. The forest did not conquer through violence. It simply continued growing. By mid-century, travelers no longer described it as a village. They referred to it as woodland. The name survived only in fading memory among older residents of neighboring communities. Then even that memory thinned. The final disappearance was not dramatic. It was gradual and nearly invisible. At some point in the early 18th century, the last remaining structure collapsed. No one recorded the moment. Snow likely weakened the beams. Rain softened the joints. Wood gave way. After that, nothing vertical remained. Beneath layers of leaves, the outlines of foundations dissolved. Tree roots penetrated cellars. Stones shifted out of alignment. Earth swallowed corners and thresholds. A generation later, children in nearby villages were told there had once been houses in that forest. But they could not see them. There were no clear ruins. Only uneven ground. Expeditions in the 19th century occasionally mentioned forgotten settlements in Polish woodlands. Some scholars searched for evidence of medieval villages lost to war. They sometimes passed near this site without recognizing it. The transformation was complete when the forest canopy merged overhead in a continuous roof of branches. Light filtered through in thin shafts. The former village center became indistinguishable from surrounding woodland. Maps standardized. Borders shifted again across Poland in later centuries. Administrations changed. Empires rose and fell. But the village did not reappear in official documents. Its disappearance became total not because it was erased violently, but because it was never recorded thoroughly enough to preserve. Archaeological traces may still lie beneath soil. Pottery fragments. Iron tools. Charred remains of hearths. But above ground, there is nothing to indicate a settlement once stood there. The climax of this story is not destruction. It is absorption. The forest did not burn the village. It did not tear it down in a single storm. It grew. Slowly. Relentlessly. And in that steady growth, the village ceased to exist as a place. It became terrain. Centuries passed without anyone marking the place. The forest matured. Oaks thickened. Pines stretched higher. Layers of leaves settled year after year, pressing the past deeper into the soil. What had once been pathways hardened into natural ridges. What had once been gardens blended into wild growth. By the late 18th century, regional maps no longer showed the village at all. Surveyors walked through woodland and recorded only trees. They did not pause. There was nothing visible to pause for. But the ground remembered. Beneath the roots lay fragments of iron tools. Broken clay vessels. Charcoal from hearth fires that once warmed small wooden rooms. Beneath several feet of soil, faint outlines of foundations still formed a pattern. A rectangle where the church once stood. Narrow lines where cottages had aligned along a dirt road. No monument marked these traces. No inscription preserved the names of the families who lived there. Parish records had ended abruptly when the final households left. The ink faded in distant archives. Pages were lost to moisture and time. The disappearance was not sudden enough to become legend. It was too quiet for chroniclers. Too small for royal attention. Too ordinary for epic memory. And so it slipped away. Occasionally, woodcutters working deeper than usual reported uneven terrain beneath thick brush. They mentioned stones where stones did not belong. But they did not investigate further. The forest provided timber. That was enough. By the 19th century, travelers described the region simply as uninterrupted woodland. They spoke of silence. Of dense canopy. Of wind moving through branches in long, low tones. No one mentioned a settlement. The final transformation was complete when even local memory dissolved. The last person who could point and say, "There was once a house here," died without record. After that, the village existed only as disturbed soil beneath trees. Its name faded first from maps, then from speech, then from thought. Today, if someone were to stand in that forest, they would see no outline of streets. No clearing shaped by human intention. Only trunks rising vertically from uneven ground. Moss covering subtle elevations that once supported walls. Roots weaving through what used to be doorways. The forest does not reveal what it absorbs. It covers carefully. It fills gaps. It erases sharp edges and replaces them with curves of earth and bark. Over time, it makes human geometry indistinguishable from natural landscape. There was no fire that ended the village. No massacre. No recorded disaster. Its destruction was patience. The people left. The houses weakened. The beams fell. The earth received them. And the trees continued growing. Now the place has no marker. No visible ruin. No sound of bells. Only wind. Only branches shifting against one another. An entire European village once stood there in the forests of Poland. Now it is only forest. And nothing in the silence suggests it was ever otherwise.